Hello, vibrant souls. Welcome back to another episode of the Nereyda Ramirez podcast. This episode specifically is going to be a part two to the most recent episode, which is episode 27. Lack of saying no can lead to depression and dark seasons. So I was listening to that episode, right? And one, I felt like I had more to say in terms of what can lead to depression and what can lead to these dark seasons. And two, I never shared tools that I used to guide me through this season of depression and dark season in my life. So this episode is going to be focused on that. And just to put it out there, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor. I'm literally sharing just from my own experience and thinking out loud. So, one of the things that I wanted to share in the last episode that totally just was brought up as I was listening is how one of the reasons why, and like what I said in the other episode was, I'm not talking about your clinical DSM-5 depression. I don't even know what this would be categorized as, but it's definitely a sense of being depressed and hopeless and sad and a desire of not wanting to live. And not that I was suicidal, I would in that space, I didn't have any action plan. I wasn't thinking about doing something about it. It was just like a strong desire of just being dead because being dead felt a lot more peaceful than being alive. And in those spaces too, right? So I'm talking about that and just dark seasons that we all go through as human beings. So one of the things that I wanted to share is that one of the reasons why we could lead into these spaces is because we are so focused on this whole right and wrong, black and white perspective. So I shared how I was very stuck in the middle of trying to please my family and trying to please this man that was in my life and his family. And one of the things that I wanted to add to that space is that aside from them, right, there was so much other stuff going on that felt that was a constant battle of what is the right thing to do. And whatever it is that is going on in your life or has gone in your life, if you've been in those spaces or you're in it now, is it a battle of right and wrong? Of what's the right thing to do? What's the wrong thing to do? What should I be doing? What shouldn't I be doing? Should and should nots. And I honestly feel that those spaces of trying to figure those out can literally cause chaos within ourselves, can literally cause these mixed World War III, in a way, feelings within ourselves. And I actually was talking to a friend not too long ago, and he was in a similar space of right and wrong. And he had expressed a little bit how a lot of it has to do with his Catholic or religious upbringing of the right thing to do. So it just made me ponder on, yeah, a lot of us have those thoughts, and it can lead us straight into these dark seasons because there is a lot of confusion. There is a lot of back and forth, internal, mental, emotional, spiritual battle within us. But one of the questions to ask, right, as we're going through these spaces of our inner battle is, what about our intuition? Going back and looking back at that season in my life, I wasn't really connected to my intuition. Just before I had met this person, I was barely learning about the intuition. And yes, I had gone through my own personal stories of Italy and the whisper in our hearts and these feelings of asking myself what I want, and yet they weren't exactly solidified just yet. There were still pondering thoughts. There were still thoughts that were just brewing, that were just like in my mind, that my friend and I were just like talking out loud, but they weren't enmeshed in who I was. They weren't a part of my foundation. They weren't part of me, myself, and I, or there wasn't any awareness of it just yet, of choosing that over everything. So in those spaces, I didn't have an intuition. And what led me to really out of this season it was to continuing to learn about the intuition, what it was saying. And I'll let you know, I'm going to share the tools with you guys of what I did and that made me listen to my intuition even more and that it made it stronger. So that's a question to ask when we're in these battles of like right and wrong and should nots is what about my intuition? Like, what is my intuition saying? How can I listen to it in this given moment? How can I be aware of all this chatter and yet silence it for a second and really connect to myself and to my gut and to these whispers in my heart? What is that saying? Because that is literally going to be the internal compass, that internal truth that guides us out of these seasons and just through so many other different seasons in our lives. And the second thing that I wanted to say as to what can lead us to depression in these dark seasons is not being honest with ourselves. So I was actually going through like some of my journals through that season in my life, and I was remembering how I lied to myself consistently and constantly. And I can even see the bullshit through my journals of how bad I wanted it. And yet there was a little slight of, I'm not feeling well, or really trying to make myself believe that I love this guy and that it was worth leaving my dreams of wanting to move abroad. And yet there was like a little slight sentence of, but I really want to leave. Hopefully I can do it one day. you know? So not being truthful with ourselves can also lead us through these seasons. And that season of my life really, really became the catalyst of becoming more open as to the truths that were happening, to the insecurities that I was having. It literally was a catalyst to live a more truthful and honest life in terms of like my beliefs, in terms of like what I was insecure about, in terms of maybe like what is the right thing to do. And not in this term of what I'm saying of right and wrong, but in terms of what's like the honest thing to do, right? And also those spaces of what am I actually feeling? Even though I don't want to look at it, like what am I actually feeling? What's the emotion? What are my actual raw thoughts with this person, with the situation, with this event, with myself, being super honest with whatever arose. And that was very, very scary when I was going through this season and just through other aspects of my life before, because it was a space of, I don't know what I'm going to find. And that's very scary. I don't know what I'm going to feel. And that's very scary. So it was a lot of like, kind of the unknown of it. And that's why in that season, and if you listen to the last podcast, when people would share their own personal truths of what they saw, it was always like, well, I don't want to be your friend anymore. And something about their truth connected to my own inner truth and gut. And yet I didn't want to see it. I wasn't willing to make the changes. I wasn't willing to see it, to be aware of it, to live through it. So that's like another question to ponder. If we're in those seasons, is am I lying to myself? What is the truth of what I'm feeling? What is the truth of what I am thinking? What is the truth of my gut in this space? And that literally will guide us and you, everybody, I strongly believe, to live a more meaningful, a more purposeful, a more vibrant, a more peaceful life. And again, sometimes it's not easy to really take the mirror and look at ourselves and point out what is it that we're lying about, or what is it that we're not being honest within our feelings or our thoughts about. Because it is like you just don't know what's going to come up, right? Like sometimes the answers to that is leaving a marriage, is leaving and not having communication with a family member. Sometimes it means quitting a job. Sometimes it means like drastic changes. And that's scary because there's so much unknown into it, which all of this actually like circles back to why I named my business, everything that I'm doing, the vibrant unknown, because you go into the unknown and yes, like we may be afraid. Yes, there might be uncertainty. Yes, there might be no absolute plan as to what it looks like. And yet it literally will lead us through a vibrant path. And yes, it might be a little rocky, right? Because it's so different, it's a new path, it's brand new territory. But yet at the same time, through it, and once you're in it, through it, over it, whatever, you'll see and feel the vibrancy of it. So so yeah, that's like another question to like ask ourselves. So those are like the two things that I really wanted to also share from the last podcast. So if you're jumping onto this one, I really, really encourage and suggest you to listen to the previous one, which is episode 27, um, to kind of put it all together. So yeah, so now in my life, I really ask my intuition what it's feeling. I really tune in with my intuition, and I've let go of a lot of the right and wrong and the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. And now that's become my beautiful foundation of how I move through life, is consistently and constantly checking in with my intuition. And I said it in the last podcast how, I was in this 3-year relationship, and one of the things that I've been super grateful for is that through the amount of that relationship, I was really checking in with my intuition and really checking in with, okay, like, how am I feeling about this? And what is my intuition saying, rather than like right and wrong? And I'm very proud of myself for that. Very, very proud of myself. And he was also very open to, being in those spaces of constantly checking in with ourselves, with our intuition. So in that way, it was also a blessing, right? To like be with somebody who was also in similar spaces of intuition and following that path. So even like with the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, same thing. Whenever I become mindful of maybe a should or a shouldn't, immediately it's a hold on. What's my intuition saying? Let me go to that core. Let me go to that inner compass instead. And because it's been constant work, now it feels like it's second nature or first nature. Now it doesn't feel like a struggle. It doesn't feel like I have to be extremely mindful about it. Now it feels like a way that I live, a path that I walk on. And it's beautiful, right? So I don't know if I shared it in the last podcast episode, but it's like when we're making these new changes in our lives, or when we're becoming aware of new ways of living, or when we're choosing ourselves more often or listening to our intuition, whatever that is, at the beginning, it might be a little hard. It might be a little rocky. There might be a lot of just maybe tiredness and reflection. There might be a lot of just not easy, right? It's like we're changing patterns. We're changing the way that we think. We're changing the way that we show up. We're changing the way that we're feeling. So, of course, it's going to be hard. So, if we're going through something like that, it's so, so validated. And I want to cheer you on to continuously go through it, to do it, and that you're doing a great job. And whether I know you or not, like, I'm so proud of you, because it is hard work. And at some point, you will get to the point where it becomes first nature. And that's like the first go to that you naturally just go to, I guess. Not, I guess, it's just the first place that you go to. Um, yeah, and even being truthful with ourselves, right? Same thing. So I noticed even like in this last relationship, same thing, where it became okay, I don't want to share this. And in past relationships, I wouldn't, but I'm gonna share it anyways. So when those moments came in of me not wanting to share, I shared it even more. For the same reason that I was in this space of changing the way that I would handle things. And yeah, like the way that I would handle things, the way that I would do things, the way that I would show up to things. And it was a really good practice, again, to be truthful with myself. And friends that I have are so fucking supportive. And shout out to my best friend, because she is my person. She's the one that holds this container of all this work, right? That I share out loud with her. Um, of just listening, of just providing the space of no judgment, no opinion, and just letting me vent and work on this live as it's happening. So, yeah, okay, so let me share with you guys some of the things that helped me through this season of depression, through this season of a dark season. So, one, prayer was huge. So, prayer, consistently asking God for a sign of what the fuck should I do next? Like, I don't know what to do, right? Like, and I was going through my journals last night, and even in my journals, there's prayers of God, oops, excuse me, of God, like, what is like the right or wrong thing to do? This is what I feel is right. This is what I feel is wrong. Like, please give me a sign of what to choose. Please give me a sign of what to do next. So asking for a sign and talking to God was like humongous. And even in those spaces, there was a little bit of maybe like toxic positivity that I also saw in my journal of, okay, I know it's happening for a reason. Like, I know it's happening and I don't know why, but I know there's a lesson here. And maybe it's not toxic positivity. Maybe that's just a different way of thinking of it, of still trying to be optimistic in the moment. As I'm saying that, I'm like, that sounds like toxic positivity. But it really helped me in the moment to look at it in a way of, okay, this is not forever. Like, I know it's not forever. I know there's a lesson in here. Please help me see it. And that was constantly, that was one of my narratives constantly throughout the season in my life. And prayer is huge too in the season in my life, because prayer, I feel, is really what helped me feel that I wasn't alone in this season, but it also helped in its own energetic way, right? So it's so crazy. So at that time, I was praying, like I said, all these things. And at the same time, later, my mom told me that she was praying that I see the truth. She was telling me that, like, there's constant prayers of like, please have Nereyda see the truth. If this is actually what she wants, please help me let go of my own thoughts and judgments and opinions or whatever it was with it. Which is very, like, very, very strong of my mom to do too. And she later expressed that she also kept praying, like, like, let me be happy for them if this is what she actually wants. But please let Nereyda see the truth. And at the same time, my best friend at the time, another friend that I had, um, that I wasn't really open with, right, um, was praying for a sign whether she should speak up or not on what was going on in my life. She had already shared much to the point where I was already disconnected from her, to the point where I was already putting a wall between us. So for her, it was like, should I share this or not? Like, she might cut me off completely if I do. So there's a lot of prayer in my life during that time. And it's so crazy because that day, kind of what I shared in my previous podcast, that day when I went to go dress shopping and when I smoked the weed and when I came out saying, hey, like, I'm not feeling right about this, or hey, like, I think I'm feeling like manipulated, and everything came out, right? Like, it was an opening for me to, like, actually see the truth. So in a way, I answered my mom's prayer. And the way that my mom and my friends' prayers were answered is that my mom ended up calling my friend and saying, hey, like, I don't know what to do. Like, I feel like somebody needs to tell her, like, what's going on, but I can't do it. Like, we weren't talking, my mom and I. So she had told my friend something along the lines of, like, like, you still have contact with her. Like, can you talk to her? And that was the prayer that my friend needed, or that was the answer to her prayer that she needed to talk to me. So again, super fucking crazy, right? Because it's like that night when I was like opening up, that was her way of like, okay, I'm going to tell you, like, this is what's going on. So it all came together of like my prayers getting answered. At the same time, it all came around to my friends' prayers getting answered, and then it came around to my mom's prayers getting answered. So that's one of the reasons why I also strongly believe in prayer, because in the midst of this season of my life, and it was affecting the people that I love the most, we were all in this deep prayer of like, God, please help us. Like, how do we move through this? How do we talk to her? Like, how do I get out of it? And the answers came in its own energetically way, and it's so beautiful. right? And I've shared stuff like this before where, with prayer, sometimes it doesn't happen in the moment. Sometimes it doesn't happen kind of like an Amazon order. It's not going to be dropped off in that given moment, but it does come through exactly when it's needed. So I walked away from that relationship a month before the wedding, and the mom had just come into town for the wedding. We were still planning, and it was just like the right time, right? In this universal truth, it was the perfect time. And I was able to leave, like that didn't happen, and like answers were given and answers were followed. So the second thing that helps so much is meditation. The reason why I am so dedicated to my meditation practice now, the reason why I'm so passionate about sharing meditation with other people and guiding other people, the reason why I am so in this conviction of these meditation spaces is because it literally guided me out of the season of depression and dark season in my life. I literally saw the effects of what it did to my life. And it's something that I'm so passionate to share with other people, especially if they're in similar spaces, because it can help. In this space that I was in, I didn't hang out with my friends, right? So I didn't do much. And I try to go to the gym here and there because it's something that kept me sane. But meditation was a constant thing. I started meditating every morning before I went to work, and I tried to pray in the evenings. And they were just random YouTube meditations of connecting to my breath, of connecting to God, of connecting to a higher power. They were meditations of affirmation, of just life going great. And I honestly feel that meditation and prayer became this opening for me to see truth, for me to hear other people's truth, for me to be aware that, okay, this is not okay. This bubble that I'm in is not okay. And there's this like really good quote. Let me see if I could find it by Victor Vagnol. Oh, let me see. Because I feel like it connects back to this. Let's see. So he wrote this The Man's Search for Meaning. Let's see. Let me look for it. Because I feel that while I was meditating in these spaces, it created that opening more and more. And it's something that happens with meditation. Okay, let's see. Where is it? Okay. So it says here, so his name is Viktor Frankl. There you go. Viktor Frankl, and he wrote again the book Man's Search for Meaning. And this is a quote: "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." So, in that season in my life, as I was meditating, I feel that that space between stimulus and response kept growing. It kept getting bigger. And I literally see it as at some point I was like super closed. And if you're on Spotify or Apple, I'm I'm doing a video, so it's also on YouTube, by the way, if you want to look that up. YouTube is Nereyda Ramirez, and I post the videos on there the same time when I post the podcast on Spotify and Apple. So when I first started, or when I first walked into this part of my life or this season, it felt like I was very closed, like this. Like there is literally no air. So I'm holding my hands tightly. There's like no air in between, no space whatsoever. It literally felt like this. And as I was walking through the season of my life, and as I was praying and meditating, it felt like there started to be space. Slowly and surely, with little, yeah, with little just, yeah, space. And as I kept doing that and using that as a practice, it started to grow bigger and bigger. So the third thing that I started doing that added to this space is I started to journal more often. I started to journal and also read. So third and fourth are journaling and reading. And I started to journal, yeah, like these spaces of even if I was lying to myself, that. Because in every single journal entry that I have, I'm not even kidding. Yes, I have this part of like, I want to be with him and like, why not? I have a sentence following of, but I really want to move abroad. And like, I'm not feeling well. And I don't know what to do. And I feel stuck. And I feel like that is an opening. It gives more of that space to be honest with yourself, to connect to your intuition. It literally opens up your heart and your mind and your emotions to be more aware of all of that. So it started to be open and open, so you can see it right through my hands. And of course, like in that space, as the quote is saying, in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. So, how beautiful is that? Because as I grew that space, the responses of how I could show up and what I can do next and all of that changed rather than saying, yes, let's do it. Yes, like I'm down for it. Yes, let's get married. Yes, yes, yes. And be in my inner conflict. There was space of, hold on, there's another way that I can respond to this. Like, hold on, I do have the power to say no. Like, wait, I can walk away. Hold on, like there was just so much to it, right? And in that space, as you can hear from like my story, there was like so much growth and freedom where I was able to walk away. And it did lead me to a whole lot of reflection. Like I shared in my previous podcast, it led into what the fuck just happened, right? It led to why couldn't I say no? And that's one of the realizations that I had after that season is that I never learned how to say no. That whenever I said no within my family systems, I always got in trouble for it. So there was so much lessons of this power of saying yes and no. And there was a lot of just, okay, like what do I want? Like what is my intuition saying? What is my intuition? What does that even mean? Right? Yes, I know the whispers of the heart, and it just made me really focus more on that. More than before, right? I already had some kind of seed, some kind of inkling, some kind of curiosity. I had already followed certain choices with the whisper in my heart. So it just made me want to go back into those spaces of, okay, like what is that? Right? Because that didn't steer me wrong. And one of the things too, like after the season, and I always feel that our higher self, our the universe is literally guiding us, especially when we create this space and when we're open and when we're willing and when we're willing to listen and to even like take the first couple of steps. I feel like our higher self and our the universe is guiding us through it, right? And if we're not open, if we're closed off, if we're not willing, if we are resistant, then no, like we're not open to see what other options, what other things are available, and I really do believe that that also leads us to being depressed in dark seasons. So after this, or actually during, right? So during, I ended up booking a ticket to Salt Lake City, Utah by myself to go to this convention in October. So I think it was like after I got married or before I got married. That was like the plan. I wanted to go to this convention, and I don't even think I told the person that I was with. I think I had just told them like, "Hey, there's this thing I wanna go to. I know you can't really go, but I really wanna go to it." And there was no real conversation about it, but I ended up applying for a scholarship, and so the convention was called The Powerful You, and Mel Robbins was gonna be there, Jay Shetty was gonna be there, Tom Bewley, hopefully I said that right, and all these other amazing public speakers were gonna be there. So I had found this event during the summer, and we were already planning for the wedding, and I had told him that I wanted to go. There was no ever conversation about it. I ended up applying for a scholarship, and I got the ticket for maybe like less than half a price. Bought the ticket, bought my ticket, my airplane ticket. And again, I don't think I ever told them anything about this. Um, and that was it. Like I left it alone. So after this, right, like we went our separate ways, and a month later I ended up going to the convention, and it was so transformative. It was so life-changing. excuse me, it gave me such a bigger perspective on the season in my life, on what had just happened. And if anything, it literally was a huge mirror pointing back to me on what's like your responsibility in this. What is it about you that allowed yourself to be in these spaces? How were you lying to yourself? At some point, it was also like a mirror of you have to take accountability for your own shit. And it was like, whoa, okay, okay. It was a lot of information. It was really good. But that, going to that convention, it really felt like my higher self, the universe, was already putting out like this path in a sense for me to continue to be on this path of like, what is my intuition and the vibrant unknown. So, and the other thing too, actually, which is so funny, the other thing too, actually, so that even after that, I think it was like after, I ended up trying mushrooms for the first time on a camping trip. And that literally was more of that conviction of, yeah, like everything is within. It was a very good trip. It was my first mushroom trip and it was very intentful. It was with the intention to connect to myself and to connect with source. And it was with, a good tribe of people. We were out in nature. So it was all very intention setting and being mindful of where I was at mentally. And it gave me such a strong conviction of, yeah, like everything is within. And yes, like everything is connected to nature. And I am connected to nature. And that's like a whole other podcast episode for another time. But I honestly feel that that was like another part of my higher self and the universe guiding me after this season of my life, of a dark season of depression. So, yeah. So, okay, so meditation, journaling, right? So, journaling is also I'm such a huge advocator for journaling because I feel that in this spaces we are releasing. We are sharing what's on your mind. We're sharing what's on our mind. We're sharing our feelings and it's a way of releasing even if we're also like angry. Whatever emotion it is we're releasing. But at the same time in those moments we're also being very honest or we could be very honest with ourselves and even if we are lying to ourselves, it's still very beneficial. And at some point when we're journaling, we look back and there's such reflection that goes and comes through as we read back what we wrote, right? Like even now, last night when I was going through it, it was like, wow, I totally forgot how fucking good I was at like not being honest with myself. So this is actually so again, prayer was like a huge thing for me. So I ended up getting a journal for I know the plans I have for you during that season in my life. As a constant like, okay, God, like help me. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. All this stuff, right? So let's see. And there's like prayers every day on this thing. So yeah, so even like last night going through it was like, wow, like, okay, I see what I wrote and I can see what I wanted and I can see how I decided to not choose myself often, consistently. I could see how even in these spaces I was trying to be optimistic as much as I could be of okay, what are the lessons? What do I have to work on? Like, why is this happening? And God give me a sign, and yeah, like I did have like good lessons that I learned, right? Like I think I learned so much more about my connection with my family and the enmeshment that we had. Like I learned that wasn't standing in my own truth. Even in those moments, it was trying to seek for other people's approval and disapproval. I even have a question here, like follow your intuition? Question mark? It's so funny. So it's like, oh, like maybe I'm trying to gain independence on a whole other level. Like maybe I'm learning that I don't have to tell everybody everything that I want. It's like learning boundaries. What am I willing to tolerate? Like what does it mean to like speak up? So it's a lot of these things and even that I have too is like right now I know to follow what I love to do and live in the moment and things will fall into place. Again, don't know if it's part of positive toxic toxicity, but it did help me in the moment. So I even wrote here, so recently I've been meditating more. Oh, yes, and I started writing poetry. So maybe that can be like the fifth one. I started writing poetry. Oh, yes, actually, let's do that one as the fifth one because I'm so glad that I'm saying this or that it came up. Because poetry is literally what also made me realize that I was in a dark fucking season. It made me realize that I was in a dark cloud, in a dark place, and with poetry, it gave me the sense of I don't have to be completely honest like I am with journaling, but I can write this through, like, metaphors. I can write this through using analogy and clouds and a boat and stuff like that, and I don't know if I'd have to look for it, but I would love to share that way. So I actually found it. This is, like, the first poem that I wrote, um, as I didn't wanna be completely honest with myself through journal writing. So this is how it goes. "I feel like a dark gray cloud just floating around and around, yet I feel down and proud, confused and aroused. Driven by emotions and maybe logic, maybe thinking that it's all being driven by magic. I don't know where this gray cloud is going, and I feel like letting it be. So tired and weary. Seems like I have strings to the cloud and I'm leading its course, trying so hard to find a driving force. My hands feel so tired of holding on to the strings, feeling like they're starting to bleed. It's starting to feel painful and more exhausting. I don't know where this dark cloud is going, but I guess I will keep holding." So, um, definitely, definitely poetry, which at the time I actually had bought a sketching pad to draw, and instead I started writing poetry in it. So there's another one that I wrote too, and I don't know if I can find that one, but that one's like a wildflower, um, poem. Let's see. Okay, I found it. So, okay, so it's called Wildflower, and I feel like I'm falling down the ladder at a top speed of 80 miles per hour, trying so hard to find a grip, trying so hard to find my own power. My hair all over the place as if I was on a very top tower, full of worry, fear, and sorrow. I ask life if this season can be as quick as a shower, but life says no. Says I feel like I'm falling down the ladder. I've decided to find my own power because even when I'm falling, no matter how many miles per hour, I can still shine like a colorful flower. Embracing the seasons as I'm falling down the ladder, only then will I realize that I'm not truly falling, but realizing my own power and growing like a wildflower. So with this, so sweet. I'm getting the chills just reading it. Um, ah, here I go. I can feel some tears coming through. Um, remembering that season, I could feel the desperation of trying not to lose myself. I could feel the desperation of really trying to hold on to who I was as a person when it came to just my personality and who I was, and it was hard. It was hard, and there was so much going on, there was so much internal conflict, um, and I was really, really trying really hard to even hold on to some kind of spiritual, higher power, purpose, and meaning to it, and it worked for me. It totally worked for me. It And even to this day, I believe that. Like, even to this day, I believe that our dark seasons and those spaces that we go through could be lessons or are lessons. And I know some people might totally disagree with it, and I know some people don't add meaning or purpose to things that we go through or like suffering. And I know that it's hard to even have a thought of how suffering has purpose. And believe me, like I struggle with it too, right? Like sometimes when I think about the injustices in the world and when I work with certain clients and I see their background or I see like their chart, it's like, wow, like how is there meaning to this? Like how is there purpose to this? How is something that's a higher purpose to all of this? And yet, even though I don't know the answer and mentally I don't understand, inherently in my soul, it feels like it's true. It feels like it's a universal truth. And that's how I walk through with my own personal life. And maybe it makes it easier, right? For me, like maybe like that's why I'm very optimistic. Maybe I don't know. Like I really don't know. So I'm pondering out loud on this episode, guys. But it's definitely something that I feel is true to my gut and my heart. And as I went through this season in my life and I pondered and I reflected, it just made it feel a much more of a conviction of yes. Like there were so many lessons there. And I went to Vietnam like maybe 8 months after that. And even when I was in Vietnam, it was like, oh, I can see why I had to go through that. Like I could see how that season taught me XYZ to the point where I'm living through the lessons and what I learned now that I'm abroad living by myself. So yeah, so it just became more of a gut truth. And even now, right? Like there's still a lot of lessons through that pops up today where it's a constant reminder of yeah, like this and this. So anyways, I'm totally going on and on and on. But okay, so to go back to this episode, part 2 of just to do a little recap, the 2 things that I shared that I wanted to share in my last podcast episode is about what leads us to depression in these dark seasons. One is this constant inner battle of right and wrong, of the shoulds and the should nots. And in those spaces, it's a really good tool or a really good thing to ask ourselves and to ponder and to be curious about our intuition. Our intuition is literally our compass, our inner truth, and that is the path to walk on. The second thing, right, is not being truthful to ourselves. When we are constantly lying to ourselves and not being honest with what we're feeling, with what emotions are arising, when we're not being honest with even our raw thoughts, could also lead us into the space of dark season and depression. So, added those 2 things. And just to recap on the 5 things that helped me is 1 prayer, 2 meditation, 3 journaling, 4 reading, and 5 poetry. Oh, one of the things that I wanted to add to the reading, actually, I don't even think I went into it, is that I was reading You Are the Universe by Deepak Chopra. I can't say his name. You Are the Universe. And I was also reading Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis. And that book literally is what helped me go through this season because in that book, she talks a lot about dreams and your goals and how nobody's going to care about your dreams as much as you do. And the whole time I had like my own little intuition and desire of wanting to move abroad and what is that like and wanting to be a speaker and like a writer. And of course, like this whole thing was happening in my life, right? And as I was reading that book, it was like a huge fuck. Like nobody's going to care about my dreams as much as I do. And right now, like I'm not caring about them. Like right now, I'm choosing not to follow my dreams. And then again, it would go with like another thought of like me lying to myself how this was the dream of getting married and how I wanted to help this guy. So, but again, it's only about that space opening up little by little. It's not going to happen overnight if you're in these spaces. So reading helped a lot. And I fucking like highlighted it. I don't think I wrote notes in it this time in that book, but so reading also helped. Um Yeah. So again, it's about that space. Okay, so with that said, guys, thank you so, so much for being here. Thank you for listening to this part two. Thank you for your not subscription. Thank you for your follow on Spotify and on Apple. Thank you for watching me on YouTube. I really appreciate you guys. And if you can, please go leave a review on Apple Podcast. Please go follow me on Apple Podcast. Please go follow me and do that little ring bell thing on Spotify. And if you haven't yet, also go follow me on YouTube. It's Nereyda Ramirez. So go subscribe and like and share this to your friends. So with that said, much, much, much love, guys.